The Rosicrucian Mysteries by Max Heindel. Chapter 1. The Order of Rosicrucians and the Rosicrucian Fellowship. Our Message and Mission. A sane mind, a soft heart, a sound body. Prior to embarking upon an exposition of the Rosicrucian teachings, it is appropriate to offer a brief introduction regarding the order and the position it occupies within the evolutionary trajectory of humanity. For reasons that shall be elucidated subsequently, these teachings advocate a dualistic perspective, maintaining that man is a spirit possessing, in latent form, all the divine attributes of God, much as a seed contains the potential of the mature plant. Furthermore, they assert that these inherent powers are gradually unfolded through a succession of existences within an increasingly refined earthly vessel, and that this developmental process has progressed under the stewardship of exalted beings who continue to direct our steps, albeit to a diminishing degree, as we progressively develop intellect and volition. These exalted beings, although imperceptible to physical sight, are nonetheless influential agents in all human affairs, imparting to the diverse cohorts of humanity those lessons most propitious for the development of their spiritual faculties. Indeed, the earth may be likened to a vast educational institution, populated by pupils of varying maturity and aptitude, analogous to those found within our own scholastic systems. At one extreme are those in a state of nature, living and worshipping under the most rudimentary conditions, perceiving the divine within a stick or a stone. Conversely, as humanity ascends the scale of civilization, there emerges a progressively elevated conception of the deity, which has culminated in the Western world in the sublime Christian faith, the source of our current spiritual inspiration and our impetus towards self-improvement. These diverse religious systems have been dispensed to each segment of humanity by those exalted entities designated in Christian tradition as the recording angels, whose extraordinary prescience allows them to discern the trajectory of so volatile an entity as the human mind. They are thus enabled to determine the precise measures required to guide our development along paths conducive to the highest universal good. An examination of ancient history reveals that approximately 600 years before the Christian era, a profound spiritual wave originated upon the eastern shores of the Pacific Ocean, where the noble Confucian system accelerated the advancement of the Chinese nation. Concurrently, the teachings of the Buddha began to enlist millions of adherents in India, while further to the west arose the sublime philosophy of Pythagoras. Each system was meticulously adapted to the specific requirements of the populace to whom it was directed. Subsequently, the era of the skeptics emerged in Greece, and later, as the spiritual impulse migrated westward, it manifested as the Christianity of the medieval period, during which the dogma of a dominant ecclesiastical authority commanded the unquestioning faith of Western Europe. It is a universal law that an epoch of spiritual awakening is invariably succeeded by a period of skeptical materialism. Both phases are indispensable if the spirit is to achieve a balanced development of heart and intellect, without being carried to extremes in either direction. The aforementioned exalted beings, who superintend our progress, invariably take measures to protect humanity against such imbalance. Thus, foreseeing the wave of materialism that commenced in the 16th century with the birth of modern science, they acted to safeguard the West, just as they had previously protected the East against skepticism through the agency of the mystery schools. In the 14th century, there appeared in Central Europe a preeminent spiritual preceptor known by the symbolic name of Christian Rosenkreuz, or Christian Rosecross, who founded the enigmatic order of the Rosy Cross. Concerning this order, much speculation has arisen, yet very little has been disclosed to the world at large. for it constitutes the mystery school of the West and is accessible solely to those who have achieved the degree of spiritual development requisite for initiation into its secrets regarding the science of life and being. Should our development progress to the degree that we are capable of releasing ourselves from the dense physical vessel to undertake a soul flight into interplanetary space, we shall discover that the ultimate physical atom is spherical in form, resembling our Earth. If one groups spheres of equal dimension around a central sphere, precisely 12 are required to completely conceal the 13th within. Thus, the 12 visible spheres and the single concealed one represent numbers that reveal a cosmic relationship. And since all mystery orders are structured upon cosmic principles, they are comprised of 12 members gathered about a 13th, who constitutes the invisible head. The spectrum consists of 7 visible colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. However, between the violet and the red, there exist 5 additional colors that remain imperceptible to physical sight, yet reveal themselves to spiritual vision. Within every mystery order, there are likewise 7 brothers who occasionally venture into the secular world to perform whatever labors are required for the advancement of the populace they serve, while the remaining 5 are never observed outside the temple. They labor with and instruct only those who have transcended specific stages of spiritual development and are capable of visiting the temple in their spiritual vehicles, an achievement imparted during the first initiation, which typically occurs outside the physical temple, as it is impractical for all to journey thither in person. Let the reader not assume that this initiation transforms the disciple into a Rosicrucian. It does not, any more than admission to a secondary school elevates a youth to the status of a faculty member. Neither does he achieve the status of a Rosicrucian upon completing all 9 degrees of this or any other mystery school. The Rosicrucians are hierophants of the lesser mysteries, beyond which lie further schools wherein the greater mysteries are taught. Those who have progressed through the lesser mysteries are termed adepts. Yet even they have not attained the elevated standing of the 12 brothers of the Rosicrucian order, nor that of the hierophants of any other school of the lesser mysteries, much as a university freshman has not yet acquired the knowledge or station of a preceptor in the secondary school from which he has recently graduated. A subsequent work shall address the subject of initiation. However, we may state at present that the portal of a genuine mystery school is not unlocked by a golden key, but is opened solely as a recompense for meritorious service to humanity. Consequently, anyone who proclaims himself a Rosicrucian or demands remuneration for instruction reveals himself, by either act, to be a charlatan. The authentic disciple of any mystery school is far too modest to publicize his status. He disdains human titles and honors, holding no regard for wealth save the riches of affection bestowed upon him by those whom he is privileged to assist and instruct. In the centuries that have elapsed since the inception of the Rosicrucian order, its members have labored quietly and in secrecy, endeavoring to shape the thought of Western Europe through the works of Paracelsus, Boehme, Bacon, Shakespeare, Flood, and others. Each night at midnight, when the physical activities of the day are at their lowest ebb and the spiritual impulse is at its highest tide, they transmit from their temple soul-stirring vibrations designed to counteract materialism and to foster the cultivation of soul faculties. To their silent endeavors we owe the gradual spiritualization of our once profoundly materialistic science. With the dawn of the 20th century, a further advancement was initiated. It was recognized that measures must be taken to render religion scientific, as well as to render science religious, so that they might ultimately coalesce. For at present the heart and the intellect remain estranged. The heart instinctively senses the truth of religious teachings concerning such sublime mysteries as the Immaculate Conception, the Crucifixion, the cleansing blood, the atonement, and other ecclesiastical doctrines. Yet the intellect refuses to assent to them, as they are incapable of empirical demonstration and appear to be in conflict with natural law. While material progress may be facilitated when the intellect holds dominion and the aspirations of the heart remain unfulfilled, spiritual evolution will inevitably be retarded until the heart also attains satisfaction. To provide humanity with a doctrine so harmoniously blended as to satisfy both the intellect and the heart, a messenger had to be sought and instructed. Specific and exceptional qualifications were requisite. Regrettably, the first individual selected failed to pass a crucial test after several years had been devoted to preparing him for the impending task. It is aphoristically stated that there is a time to sow and a time to reap, and that precise seasons govern all the endeavors of life. In accordance with this law of periodicity, every impulse towards spiritual elevation must likewise be initiated at an auspicious moment to ensure success. The first and sixth decades of each century are singularly propitious for commencing the promulgation of new spiritual teachings. Consequently, the Rosicrucians were deeply concerned by this failure, as a mere 5 years remained of the first decade of the 20th century. Their second selection of an emissary fell upon the present writer, though he was entirely unaware of it at the time, and by orchestrating the circumstances surrounding him, they enabled him to enter a period of preparation for the labor they wished him to undertake. 3 years thence, when he had journeyed to Germany, likewise owing to circumstances arranged by the invisible brotherhood, and stood on the precipice of despair upon discovering that the light which was the object of his quest was but a will-o'-the-wisp, the brothers of the Rosicrucian order administered the test to determine whether he would prove a faithful messenger and impart to the world the teachings they desired to entrust to him. Upon his successful passage of this trial, they imparted to him that monumental solution to the problem of existence, first published in the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception in November 1909, more than a year prior to the expiration of the first decade of the 20th century. This volume heralded a new era in so-called occult literature. The numerous editions subsequently published, alongside the thousands of letters that continue to reach the author, stand as eloquent testimonies to the fact that seekers are finding in these teachings a satisfaction they had hitherto sought elsewhere in vain. The Rosicrucians teach that all great religions have been bestowed upon the peoples among whom they reside by divine intelligences, who designed each system of worship to accord with the specific needs of the race or nation to whom it was delivered. A primitive populace cannot respond to a lofty and sublime religion, and vice versa. That which benefits one race would hinder another. Consequently, in pursuance of this same policy, a system of soul unfoldment has been devised especially for Western peoples, who are racially and temperamentally unsuited to undergo the discipline of the Eastern school, which was designed for the more backward Hindus. The Rosicrucian Fellowship. With the purpose of promulgating the Rosicrucian teachings throughout the Western world, the Rosicrucian Fellowship was established in 1909. It stands as the herald of the Aquarian Age, wherein the sun, by its precessional passage through the constellation of Aquarius, will awaken all the intellectual and spiritual potencies latent within humanity, which are symbolized by that sign. Just as heat radiating from a hearth warms all objects within its sphere, so too shall the Aquarian ray elevate the vibrations of the earth to a pitch we are currently unable to comprehend, though we already witness demonstrations of the material operations of this force in the inventions that have revolutionized existence within the memory of the living generation. We have marveled at the X-ray, which penetrates the human form, Yet every individual possesses a latent faculty which, when fully developed, will enable him to perceive through any number of bodies or across any distance. We marvel at telephone communication across the American continent, yet each of us possesses an inherent sense of speech and hearing that is far more acute. We are astonished by the exploits of vessels beneath the sea and in the heavens, yet we are all capable of passing beneath the waters or navigating the skies. Nay, furthermore, we may traverse and scathe the solid rock and the raging fire, if we but possess the requisite knowledge, and lightning itself is sluggish compared to the velocity with which we may travel. To contemporary minds, this may bear the semblance of a fairy tale, much as did the narratives of Jules Verne to a previous generation. Yet the Aquarian age shall witness the realization of these dreams, and indeed of far greater marvels of which we do not yet even conceive. Such faculties will then become the possession of a vast multitude of individuals who will have gradually evolved them, just as the capacities to walk, speak, hear, and see were developed in epochs past. Therein lies a profound peril, for demonstrably any individual endowed with such faculties might employ them to the immense detriment of the world at large, unless restrained by a spirit of selflessness and an all-embracing altruism. Hence, religion is required today as never before to foster love and fellowship among humanity, so that mankind may be prepared to employ the magnificent gifts in store for it both wisely and well. This need for religion is particularly acute among a certain class of individuals whose etheric vehicles are more loosely conjoined with their physical atoms than is the case with the majority. On this account, they are already beginning to sense the Aquarian vibrations. This class is further subdivided into two distinct groups. In the first, the intellect holds sway, and its members consequently seek to comprehend the spiritual mysteries out of curiosity, from the perspective of cold reason. They pursue the path of knowledge solely for its own sake, deeming it an end in itself. The conception that knowledge possesses value only when applied to practical, constructive purposes does not appear to have occurred to them. This class we may designate as occultists. The second group remains indifferent to mere knowledge, but experiences an inward yearning toward God, pursuing the path of devotion to the sublime ideal presented in Christ, and performing his works so far as their mortal nature permits. In process of time, this devotion culminates in an interior illumination that brings with it all the knowledge acquired by the former class, and indeed, far more. This class we may describe as mystics. Certain perils confront each of these two groups. Should the occultist attain illumination and develop his latent spiritual faculties, he might employ them for the furtherance of his personal ambitions, to the grievous detriment of his fellow men. This constitutes black magic, and the retribution which it automatically visits upon the perpetrator is so terrible that it is best to draw a veil over it. The mystic may likewise err through ignorance, thereby becoming entangled in the meshes of nature's laws. Yet, because he is motivated by love, his transgressions will never be of a grievous nature, and as he grows in grace, the silent voice within his heart will speak with increasing clarity to direct his path. The Rosicrucian Fellowship endeavors to prepare humanity at large, and the sensitives of these two groups in particular, for the awakening of the latent powers within man, so that all may be guided safely through this perilous transition and be as thoroughly equipped as possible to employ these newly unfolded faculties. Every effort is made to blend that love, without which St. Paul declared a comprehension of all mysteries to be worthless, with a mystic knowledge rooted and grounded in love, to the end that the students of this school may become living exponents of this harmonious soul science of the Western wisdom school, and gradually instruct humanity at large in the virtues necessary to render the possession of higher powers secure. Chapter 2. The Problem of Life and Its Solution. The problem of life. Amid all the vicissitudes of life, which vary in the experience of every individual, there is one event that sooner or later awaits everyone. Death. Regardless of our station in life, whether our existence has been laudable or the reverse, whether great achievements have distinguished our path among men, whether health or infirmity has been our lot, whether we have enjoyed renown and been surrounded by a host of admiring companions or have wandered obscurely through the years of our earthly sojourn, there inevitably arrives a moment when we stand alone before the portal of death, compelled to take that leap into the dark. The contemplation of this leap, and of that which lies beyond, must inevitably intrude upon the consciousness of every reflective individual. In the years of youth and vigor, when the vessel of our life glides upon seas of prosperity, and all appears radiant and fair, we may banish such thoughts from our minds. Yet there will assuredly come a time in the life of every rational being when the profound enigma of life and death forces itself upon his consciousness, refusing to be dismissed. Nor will it avail him to accept the ready-made solution of another without reflection and in blind faith. For this is a fundamental problem which each individual must resolve for himself in order to attain true satisfaction. Upon the eastern fringe of the Sahara Desert stands the world-renowned Sphinx, its inscrutable countenance turned toward the east, perpetually greeting the sun as its rising rays herald the dawning day. According to Greek mythology, it was the custom of this monster to pose a riddle to every traveler. Those unable to answer she devoured. Yet, when Oedipus solved the enigma, she destroyed herself. The riddle she proposed to mankind was that of life and death, an inquiry as vital today as it has ever been, and one which each individual must resolve, lest he be consumed by the jaws of death. Yet, once an individual has discovered the solution to this problem, it becomes manifest that in truth there is no death. That which appears as such is merely a transition from one state of existence to another. Thus, for him who discovers the true solution to the riddle of life, the Sphinx of death ceases to exist, enabling him to raise his voice in the triumphant cry, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" Diverse theories of life have been advocated to resolve this problem. We may divide these into two principal categories, namely the monistic theory, which posits that all the phenomena of life can be explained by reference to this visible world in which we dwell, and the dualistic theory, which attributes a portion of these phenomena to another realm currently invisible to us. In his celebrated masterpiece, The School of Athens, Raphael has most aptly depicted the respective attitudes of these two schools of thought. Within that marvelous painting, we behold a Greek courtyard, reminiscent of those places where philosophers of antiquity were accustomed to assemble. Upon the steps ascending to the edifice, a multitude of men are engaged in profound discourse. Yet at the summit's center stand two figures, representing Plato and Aristotle. One gestures toward the heavens, the other toward the earth, each gazing upon the other in silence, yet with a deeply concentrated will, each endeavoring to convince the other of the rectitude of his position, for each harbors an unshakable conviction within his heart. One maintains that he is of the earth earthy, that he has emerged from the dust and to the dust he must return. The other steadfastly defends the premise that there exists a higher, spiritual essence which has ever existed and will endure, irrespective of whether the physical body wherein it currently resides remains intact. The question of which view is correct remains unresolved for the majority of mankind. Vast quantities of paper and printer's ink have been consumed in futile endeavors to settle the issue through disputation. Yet it must ever remain open to those who have not personally solved the riddle, for this is a fundamental problem, an intrinsic part of the life experience of every human being, and therefore no one can offer us a prefabricated solution for our passive acceptance. All that can be accomplished by those who have truly resolved the issue is to indicate to others the path along which they discovered their solution, thereby guiding the seeker in how he, through his own exertions, may arrive at a satisfactory conclusion. Such is the objective of this modest volume. Not to present a solution to the mystery of life to be accepted blindly, upon faith in the author's capacity for investigation. The teachings expounded herein are those transmitted by the great Western mystery school of the Rosicrucian order, representing the concurrent testimony of a long lineage of trained seers. These have been imparted to the author and supplemented by his own independent investigation of the realms traversed by the spirit in its cyclic journey from the invisible world to this plane of existence, and thence back again. Nevertheless, the student is cautioned that the writer may have misapprehended certain aspects of these teachings, and that, despite the utmost diligence, he may have formed an erroneous conception of that which he believes himself to have witnessed in the invisible world, where the hazards of error are manifold. In this terrestrial realm which we perceive around us, forms are stable and do not readily alter. Yet, in the surrounding world, discernible only through spiritual vision, it may be said that form, in reality, does not exist, for all is life. At least, the forms there are so mutable that the metamorphoses recounted in fairy tales are surpassed to an astonishing degree. Consequently, we are presented with the remarkable disclosures of mediums and other untrained clairvoyants who, though entirely sincere, are misled by the illusions of an evanescent form, owing to their inability to perceive the underlying life that constitutes the permanent foundation of that form. We must learn to perceive in this realm. A newborn infant possesses no conception of distance and will reach for objects far beyond its grasp, until it has learned to gauge its physical limitations. Similarly, a blind man who acquires the faculty of sight, or has it restored by surgical means, will initially be inclined to close his eyes when moving about, declaring it easier to walk by touch than by sight. This occurs because he has not yet learned to employ his newly acquired faculty. In like manner, the individual whose spiritual vision has newly unfolded requires rigorous training. Indeed, his need is far greater than that of the infant or the formerly blind man. Bereft of such instruction, he would resemble a newborn babe placed in a nursery whose walls are lined with convex and concave mirrors, distorting both its own image and the forms of its attendants. Were the child permitted to mature in such an environment, unable to perceive the true outlines of itself and its guardians, it would naturally believe that it beheld a multitude of diverse and distorted figures, whereas the mirrors alone were responsible for the illusion. If the child and those around it were subsequently removed from these deceptive surroundings, the child would be incapable of recognizing them until the phenomenon had been adequately explained. Comparable dangers of illusion beset those who have developed spiritual sight, until they have been trained to discount the refraction and to perceive the permanent and stable life, disregarding the evanescent and mutable form. Nevertheless, the peril of misperception ever persists and is of so subtle a nature that the writer deems it his imperative duty to caution his readers to receive all statements concerning the unseen world with the proverbial grain of salt, as he has no desire to mislead. Consequently, he prefers to emphasize rather than diminish his own limitations, and would advise the student to accept nothing from the author's pen without subjecting it to his own rational scrutiny. Thus, should the reader be misled, he will be self-deceived, and the author remains blameless. 3 Theories of Life. Only 3 noteworthy theories have been proffered as solutions to the riddle of existence, and in order that we may make an informed and critical choice among them, we shall briefly delineate their tenets and present certain arguments that lead us to advocate the doctrine of rebirth as the paradigm most conducive to soul growth and the ultimate attainment of perfection, thereby offering the preeminent solution to the problem of life. The materialistic theory teaches that life is merely a brief journey from the cradle to the grave, that there exists no higher intelligence in the cosmos than man, that his consciousness is produced by certain correlations of matter, and that, consequently, the death and dissolution of the physical vehicle terminate existence entirely. There was an era when the arguments of materialistic philosophers appeared persuasive, but as science advances, it increasingly discerns that there is a spiritual dimension to the cosmos, that life and consciousness may persist without the capacity to manifest outward signs has been amply demonstrated in instances where an individual, having fallen into a trance and been presumed dead for days, has suddenly awakened and recounted everything that transpired around their inert form. Such eminent scientists as Sir Oliver Lodge, Camille Flammarion, Lombroso, and other men of the highest intellect and scientific training have unequivocally declared, as the fruit of their investigations, that the intelligence we designate as man survives the demise of the physical body. This intelligence continues to exist in our midst as independently of our sensory perception as light and color exist around a blind man, irrespective of his inability to perceive them. These scientists arrived at their conclusions only after years of meticulous inquiry. They have discovered that the so-called deceased can, and under specific conditions do, communicate with us in a manner that renders error impossible. We contend that their testimony possesses far greater weight than the contrary assertions of materialism, for it is founded upon years of rigorous empirical investigation and is in perfect alignment with such well-established principles as the law of conservation of matter and the law of conservation of energy. Mind, being a form of energy, is immune to the destruction posited by the materialist. Consequently, we reject the materialistic theory as untenable, because it is discordant both with the laws of nature and with well-established facts. The theory of theology claims that just prior to each birth a soul is created by God and enters the world, wherein it lives for a duration varying from a few minutes to a few score years, that at the close of this brief span of existence, it returns through the portal of death to the invisible beyond, where it remains forever in a state of happiness or misery according to the deeds committed in the body during the few years of its earthly residence. Plato insisted upon the necessity of a precise definition of terms as the requisite foundation for any discourse, and we contend that such precision is no less indispensable when discussing the problem of life from a biblical perspective than when arguing from a Platonic standpoint. According to the Bible, man is a composite being consisting of body, soul, and spirit. The latter two terms are commonly regarded as synonymous, but we maintain that they are by no means interchangeable, and we offer the following in support of our assertion. All things exist in a state of vibration. Vibrations from surrounding objects constantly impinge upon us, conveying to our consciousness a perception of the external world. Etheric vibrations act upon our eyes to produce sight, while atmospheric vibrations transmit sounds to the ear. Furthermore, we inhale the air and ether, which are perpetually charged with the visual and auditory images of our environment. Thus, by means of the breath, we receive at every moment of our existence, internally, an accurate representation of our external surroundings. This is a sound scientific proposition. Science, however, does not explain the ultimate fate of these vibrations. But according to the Rosicrucian mystery teachings, They are transmitted to the blood and subsequently etched upon a minute atom within the heart as automatically as a motion picture is captured upon a sensitized film, or as sounds are engraved upon a phonographic disc. This respiratory record begins with the first breath of the newborn infant and concludes only with the final expiration of the dying man, the soul itself being a product of this breath. The book of Genesis likewise illustrates this intimate connection between breath and soul in the words, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." In the post-mortem state, this breath record is resolved. The virtuous deeds of life generate feelings of pleasure, and the intensity of this attraction assimilates them into the spirit as soul power. Thus, the breath records of our virtuous deeds constitute the soul that is saved, for through their union with the spirit they attain immortality. As they accumulate over successive lifetimes, we grow increasingly soulful. Hence, they form the very foundation of soul growth. Conversely, the record of our transgressive acts is also derived from our breath at the moments of their commission. The pain and suffering these misdeeds engender cause the spirit to purge the corresponding breath record from its being while in purgatory. Since this record cannot exist independently of the animating spirit, the breath record of our sins disintegrates upon its expurgation, and thus we perceive that the soul that sinneth, it shall die. The memory of the suffering attendant upon this expurgation, however, remains with the spirit as conscience, serving to deter the individual from repeating the same transgressions in subsequent incarnations. Thus, both our virtuous and our vicious actions are recorded through the medium of the breath, which is consequently the foundation of the soul. Yet, while the breath record of righteous deeds coalesces with the spirit to endure eternally as an immortal soul, the breath record of evil deeds is dissolved. It is indeed the soul that sinneth and dies. While the Bible teaches that the immortality of the soul is conditional upon righteousness, it makes no such qualification regarding the spirit. The scriptural declaration is unequivocal when the silver cord be loosed, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return to God who gave it. Thus, the Bible teaches that the body is formed of dust and returns to dust, that a portion of the soul generated by the breath is transitory, but that the spirit survives physical death and endures forever. Consequently, the concept of a lost soul in the popular acceptance of the term is not a biblical doctrine, for the spirit is uncreated and as eternal as God himself. Therefore, the orthodox theological theory cannot be true. The theory of rebirth, which teaches that each spirit is an integral part of God, that it enfolds all divine possibilities as the acorn enfolds the oak, that by means of many existences in an earthly body of gradually improving texture its latent powers are slowly unfolded and rendered available as dynamic energy, that none can be lost but that all will ultimately attain to perfection and reunion with God, each bringing with it the accumulated experiences which are the fruitage of its pilgrimage through matter. Or, as we may poetically express it, we are eternal. On whistling storm cloud, on Zephyr's wing, the spirit choir loud the world anthems sing. Hark! List to their voice. We have passed through death's door. There is no death. Rejoice. Life lives evermore. We are, have always been, will ever be. We are a portion of eternity older than creation, a part of one great whole, is each individual and immortal soul. On time's whirring loom our garments we've wrought, eternally weave we on network of thought, our kin and our country, by mind brought to birth, were patterned in heaven air molded on earth. We have shone in the jewel and danced on the wave, we have sparkled in fire, defying the grave, through shapes ever-changing. In size, kind and name our individual essence still is the same. And when we have ascended to the highest of all, the gradations of growth our minds shall recall, so that link by link we may join them together and trace step by step the path we took thither. Thus in time we shall understand, if only we perform that which elevates, ennobles, is righteous and true, with benevolence toward all, with malice toward none, that in and through us God's will may be done. We venture to assert that there exists but a single sin, ignorance, and but one salvation, applied knowledge. Yet even the wisest among us comprehend but a fraction of that which may be acquired, and none has attained perfection, nor can one achieve it within a single brief existence. Nevertheless, we observe that throughout nature, a gradual and persistent unfoldment facilitates the progressively higher development of all things, a process we designate as evolution. A primary characteristic of evolution lies in its manifestation through alternating cycles of activity and repose. The industrious summer, wherein all earthly entities exert themselves to bring forth life, is succeeded by the flood tide. Consequently, as all other phenomena progress in cycles, the life which manifests upon this earth for a brief span of years is not to be regarded as terminated upon the arrival of death. Rather, as surely as the sun rises in the morning after setting at night, so will the life concluded by the demise of one physical form be resumed in a new vehicle and within a different environment. This earth may, indeed, be likened to an academy to which we return existence after existence to acquire new lessons, precisely as our children attend school day after day to expand their knowledge. The child sleeps through the night that intervenes between death and a new birth. Moreover, there exist diverse classes within this terrestrial academy, corresponding to the various grades spanning from kindergarten to university. Within the lower classes, we encounter spirits who have attended the school of life only a few times. Though they are currently primitive, in time they shall become wiser and nobler than we, whilst we ourselves shall progress in future existences to spiritual heights of which we cannot presently conceive. Should we diligently apply ourselves to mastering the lessons of life, we shall naturally advance far more rapidly through this school of existence than if we were to procrastinate and squander our time in idleness. This conforms to the identical principle that governs our own institutions of learning. We are not here, therefore, by the caprice of God. He has not placed one individual in prosperity and another in a barren wasteland, nor has he endowed one with a robust physical form to live unafflicted by pain and disease, while placing another in impoverished circumstances with no respite from suffering. Rather, what we are by virtue of our own diligence or negligence, and our future state depends entirely upon what we will ourselves to become, rather than upon divine caprice or inexorable fate. Regardless of the circumstances, it remains within our power to master them, or to be mastered by them according to our will. Sir Edwin Arnold expresses this doctrine most exquisitely in his The Light of Asia. The books say well, my brothers, each man's life the outcome of his former living is, the bygone wrongs bring forth sorrows and woes, the bygone right breeds bliss. Each has such lordship as the loftiest ones. Nay, for with powers around, above, below, as with all flesh and whatsoever lives act mocketh joy or woe. Who toiled, a slave, may come anew a prince for gentle worthiness and merit one. Who ruled, a king, may wander earth in rags for things done or undone. Or, as Ella Wheeler Wilcox observes, one ship sails east and another sails west with the selfsame winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sail, and not the gale which determines the way they go. As the winds of the sea are the ways of fate as we voyage along through life. 'Tis the act of the soul which determines the goal and not the calm or the strife. When we desire to engage an individual to undertake a specific mission, we select one whom we deem singularly qualified to fulfill the requirements. We must therefore assume that a divine being would employ at least equal discernment and refrain from commissioning anyone to perform his errand who was not preeminently suited therefor. Thus, when we read in the Holy Scriptures that Samson was foreordained to be the slayer of the Philistines and that Jeremiah was predestined to be a prophet, it is entirely logical to infer that they must have been uniquely suited to such callings. Likewise, John the Baptist was destined from birth to be the herald of the advent of the Savior, and to proclaim the kingdom of God, which is to supersede the kingdoms of men. Had these individuals possessed no prior preparation, how could they have developed such aptitude to fulfill their respective missions? And if they were indeed so prepared, in what manner could they have acquired their training if not in antecedent existences? The Jewish people clearly adhered to the doctrine of rebirth. Otherwise, they would not have inquired of John the Baptist whether he were Elijah, as recorded in the opening chapter of the Gospel of John. The apostles of Christ also shared this belief, as evidenced by the incident recorded in the 16th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, wherein Christ posed the inquiry, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" To which the apostles replied, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremias or one of the prophets." On this occasion, Christ tacitly endorsed the doctrine of rebirth. He did not correct his disciples, as would have been his manifest duty in his capacity as preceptor had his pupils harbored an erroneous conception. Yet to Nicodemus he declared unequivocally, "Except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." And in the 11th chapter of Matthew, the 14th verse, he asserted, when speaking of John the Baptist, "This is Elijah." In the 17th chapter of Matthew, the 12th verse, he proclaimed, "Elijah is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed." Thereupon the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. Thus, we contend that the doctrine of rebirth offers the sole solution to the enigma of existence that harmonizes with natural law, satisfies the ethical imperatives of justice, and allows us to revere the divine without blinding our intellect to the inequities of life and the disparate circumstances that afford to a privileged few the ease, comfort, health, and wealth denied to the multitude. The theory of heredity posited by materialists applies exclusively to the physical form. For just as a carpenter utilizes materials from a specific timber pile to construct a dwelling in which he subsequently resides, so does the spirit draw the substance wherewith to construct its house from its parents. The carpenter cannot fashion a hardwood dwelling from spruce lumber, and likewise, the spirit must construct a body resembling the ancestral source from which its physical materials were derived. However, the theory of heredity does not hold true upon the moral plane. Indeed, it is an established fact that within the criminal archives of America and Europe, there exists no record wherein both a father and his son are represented. Consequently, the offspring of criminals, despite inheriting tendencies toward transgression, frequently elude the grasp of the law. Nor does heredity hold valid upon the intellectual plane, for numerous instances may be cited where a genius and an imbecile originate from the selfsame lineage. The eminent Cuvier, whose brain was of approximately the same weight as Daniel Webster's, and whose intellect was equally profound, fathered 5 children who all succumbed to paresis. Similarly, the brother of Alexander the Great was intellectually deficient. Thus, we maintain that an alternative explanation must be sought to account for the realities of human existence. The law of rebirth, conjoined with its companion principle, the law of causation, provides precisely that resolution. Upon the conclusion of one earthly existence, we depart, only to return to this sphere at a later period under conditions determined by the manner of our prior conduct. The gamester is naturally drawn to billiard halls and racecourses to associate with those of similar inclinations. The musician is attracted to concert halls and conservatories where congenial spirits dwell, and the returning ego likewise retains its affinities and antipathies, which guide it to seek parentage within the very class to which it inherently belongs. Yet, some may point to cases where we find individuals of entirely opposite tastes enduring lives of mutual torment, because they are grouped within the same family and forced by circumstances to remain there contrary to their volition. This, however, does not in the slightest degree invalidate the law. In each life we contract certain obligations which cannot then be fulfilled. Perhaps we have fled from a duty, such as the care of an invalid relative, and have met death without coming to a realization of our error. That relative, on the other hand, may have suffered severely from our neglect, and may have harbored a bitterness against us before death terminated their suffering. Death and the subsequent transition to another environment do not liquidate our debts in this life, any more than relocating from our current city of residence to another place will discharge the liabilities we contracted prior to our departure. It is, therefore, entirely possible that the two who have injured each other as described may find themselves members of the same family. Then, whether they retain a recollection of the past grudge or not, the old enmity will assert itself and cause them to hate anew, until the resulting discomfort compels them to tolerate one another, and perhaps later they may learn to love where they once hated. The question also arises in the minds of inquirers. If we have been here before, why do we not remember? The answer is that while the majority of people are not aware of how their previous existences were spent, there are others who possess a highly distinct recollection of past lives. An acquaintance of the author, for instance, whilst residing in France, began one day to read to her son about a certain city toward which they were then journeying upon a bicycle tour, whereupon the boy exclaimed, "You do not need to tell me about that, mother. I know that city. I lived there and was killed." He then commenced to describe the city, as well as a certain bridge. Subsequently, he conducted his mother to that bridge and indicated the spot where he had met his death centuries before. Another friend, traveling in Ireland, beheld a scene which she recognized, and she also described to her party the landscape lying around the bend of the road, which she had never seen in her present life, so that it must have been a memory from a previous existence. Numerous other instances could be cited where such minor flashes of memory reveal to us glimpses of a past life. The verified case in which a little 3-year-old girl in Santa Barbara described her life and death has been presented in the Rosicrucian cosmoconception. It is, perhaps, the most conclusive evidence, as it hinges upon the veracity of a child far too young to have learned deception. This theory of life does not, however, rest upon speculation. It is one of the primary facts of life demonstrated to the pupil of a mystery school. He is taught to observe a child in the act of dying, and also to watch it in the invisible world from day to day, until it enters upon a new birth a year or two later. Thereupon, he knows with absolute certainty that we return to earth to reap in a future life that which we now sow. The rationale for selecting a child to observe in preference to an adult is that the child is reborn very rapidly, for its brief life on earth has borne but few fruits, and these are soon assimilated. whereas the adult who has lived a long life and had much experience remains in the invisible worlds for centuries, so that the pupil could not watch him from death to rebirth. The cause of infant mortality will be explained hereafter. Here we merely desire to emphasize the fact that it lies within the capacity of everyone, without exception, to become able to know at first hand that which is here taught. The average interval between two earthly existences is approximately 1,000 years. It is determined by that movement of the sun known to astronomers as the precession of the equinox, whereby the sun moves through one of the signs of the zodiac in about 2,100 years. During that period, conditions upon earth alter so profoundly that the spirit will find entirely new experiences here, and therefore it returns. The great leaders of evolution always obtain the maximum benefit from each condition designed by them, and since the experiences under the same social conditions are vastly different for a man from what they are for a woman, the human spirit takes birth twice during the 2,100 years measured by the precession of the equinox, as already explained. It is born once as a man and another time as a woman. Such is the rule, but it is subject to whatever modifications may be necessary to facilitate the reaping of what the spirit has sown, as required under the law of causation, which works hand in hand with the law of rebirth. Thus, at times, a spirit may be brought to birth long before the 1,000 years have expired, in order to fulfill a certain mission, or it may be detained in the invisible worlds past the time when it should have come to birth according to the strict requirements of a blind law. The laws of nature, however, are not thus. They are great intelligences who always subordinate minor considerations to higher ends, and under their beneficent guidance, we are constantly progressing from life to life under conditions precisely suited to each individual, until in time we shall attain to a higher evolution and become supermen. Oliver Wendell Holmes has most beautifully voiced that aspiration and its consummation in the lines, "Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll. Leave thy low vaulted past, let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea." Chapter 3. The Visible and the Invisible Worlds. The Chemical Region. If one who is capable of consciously employing his spiritual body with the same facility that we now utilize our physical vehicles should glide away from the Earth into interplanetary space, the Earth and the various other planets of our solar system would appear to him or her to be composed of three distinct grades of matter, roughly speaking. The densest matter, which constitutes our visible Earth, would appear to him as being the center of the sphere, much as the yolk resides at the center of an egg. Around that nucleus, he or she would observe a finer grade of matter, situated in relation to the central mass in a manner analogous to how the white of the egg is disposed outside the yolk. Upon slightly closer investigation, he would also discover that this second kind of substance permeates the solid earth to its very center, even as blood percolates through the more solid portions of our flesh. Outside both of these intermingling layers of matter, he would observe a still finer third layer corresponding to the shell of the egg, with the distinction that this third layer is the most subtle and refined of the three grades of matter, and that it completely interpenetrates both of the inner layers. As previously stated, the central mass, when spiritually perceived, is our visible world, composed of solids, liquids, and gases. These constitute the earth, its atmosphere, and also the ether, of which physical science speaks hypothetically as permeating the atomic substance of all chemical elements. The second layer of matter is designated the desire world, and the outermost layer is termed the world of thought. A little reflection upon the subject will render it clear that precisely such a constitution is necessary to account for the facts of life as we observe them. All forms in the world around us are constructed from chemical substances, solids, liquids, and gases. But insofar as they exhibit movement, these forms obey a separate and distinct impulse, and when this impelling energy departs, the form becomes inert. The steam engine rotates under the impetus of an invisible gas termed steam. Prior to the Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.